Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here tonight at ISAC and online too. It is my great pleasure. I'm Hervé Reculot, Associate Professor of Archaeology here at ISAC, and it is my great pleasure to introduce tonight Professor Dominique Charpin from the Collège de France in Paris as part of a partnership between the University of Chicago and the Collège de France that dates back to 2008 and is managed by the France-Chicago Center here on campus. And that partnership will later this quarter bring you to campus Denis Duboul in early May and Anne Cheng in late May. But tonight, this is Dominique Charpin, the titular holder of the Chair of Mesopotamian Civilization at the Collège de France. Prior to holding this chair, Professor Charpin had positions at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique, the University's Paris I Panthéon-Sorbonne, and the École Pratique des Hautes Études. He is also a corresponding member of the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles-Lettres, a honorary member of the American Oriental Society, and to our great pride, since 2020, the holder of a honorary degree of Doctor of Human Letters here at the University of Chicago. I will not go into too many details of his extensive bibliography, otherwise I'm just going to be speaking the entire night, because Professor Charpin not only edited 6 volumes, if my count is right, but is the mostly single and sometimes co-author of no less than 15 monographs, and I will not do into the at least 250 articles, plus others here and there. Professor Charpin is the renowned authority on the early second millennium Mesopotamian history, the Old Babylonian period, where he has been one of the chief scholars both for Mari in Syria and for southern Mesopotamia, southern Iraq, which is what he will be presenting today. He has been a field epigrapher since the late 1970s in Mari, and then in Iraq between 1985 and 1989 in Larsa, and more recently from 2015 to 2022 in Ur, and since 29 in Larsa. He's also an important figure in digital humanities for our field because he is the editor in charge of the online database archibab.fr, which has the goal to bring to the public all the archival texts from this Old Babylonian period, and there is currently 785 texts available in the database out of a total of 35,000 who are completely published. And he's been writing on many topics, but I will not get into details because I think it's better to hear it from himself. And please join me in welcoming Dominique Charpin.
I'd like to start by saying what a pleasure it is to be here this evening. This invitation, as Hervé said, is part of the regular exchanges between the Collège de France and the University of Chicago with the support of the France-Chicago Center and, of course, ISAC. Let me add a few personal considerations that explain the double title of my talk today. I had the good fortune to discover the sites of Larsa and Ur when I was very young. I was a master's student, barely 20, when Jean-Louis Huot suggested I come and excavate at Larsa, which he had just taken over as director in 1974. When I was preparing my PhD on the text of Tel Sifre, a small site near Larsa, I was involuntarily brought back to Ur. Indeed, I was able to demonstrate that a third of the texts supposedly discovered at Tel Sifre by Loftus in 1854 actually came from Taylor's excavation in Ur that same year. And it was to the clergy of Ur that I dedicated my second book in 1985. In fact, this was the subject of my first lecture here at the Oriental Institute, as it was at that time known, in March 1983. And I remember with gratitude the welcome I received then, particularly from Erika Reiner and Miguel Civil, and also some of you who are fortunately still here. 1985 also saw my return to the Larsa team, this time as an epigraphist. After 1989, archaeological work in Iraq was interrupted for a very long time, and during these years I worked more in Syria, but Syria in turn closed in 2011. In 2015, at the invitation of the late Abdelhamir Al-Hamdani, Elizabeth Stone resumed the excavation of Ur. She proposed that I become the epigraphist of her team. Naturally, I gladly accepted. I never had dreamt I would be ever epigrapher at Ur. And I took part in the 2015, 17, and 19 campaigns with Adelaide Otto and her team from Munich as reinforcements from 2017 onwards. With Elizabeth Stone's retirement, the mission has been attached to the University of Pennsylvania, and Brad Harford became its field director, leading a new campaign in autumn 2022, in which I also took part. In the meantime, Régis Vallet succeeded in resuming the Larsa excavation in 2019, and I was delighted to return as epigraphist, which I did in 2019, 21, and again in 22, with Antoine Jacquet at my side since 2021. I'd therefore like to share with you this evening some of the results of this work, with particular emphasis on the characteristics of field epigraphy. It's an undertaking that is both exciting in terms of discoveries that are made and at times not without its difficulties. I recently wrote a contribution on this subject. Working in the field, having seen the texts in context, is an undeniable advantage when it comes to exploiting the data they are likely to deliver. Ur is one of the most important sites in southern Iraq, near the present-day town of Nasiriyeh. It can be recognized from afar by the imposing mass of its multi-story tower, its famous ziggurat. A symposium was held in November 2022, celebrating the centenary of excavations by Woolley, who led 12 campaigns from 1922 to 1934. The papers are available on the BCE YouTube site, and the proceedings are due to be published shortly. The objectives set by Elizabeth Stone for the archaeological mission were threefold. First, to gain a better understanding of the city of Ur in its environment. The use of technique unknown in Woolley's day had led to considerable progress. These include geophysical prospecting, as well as aerial views using a drone, something unthinkable just a few years ago. We are no longer in the days of the pioneers, to whom the exhibition opening here in just 1 week's time will be dedicated. I'd like to thank Adelaide Otto and Bertolt Alweig, who provided me with some breathtaking views to illustrate my lecture. Here is, for instance, an overview of the site with the ziggurat on the foreground, the ziggurat from above, and a view of the southern part of the site. Second objective, to gain a better understanding of the Old Babylonian settlement. Woolley had excavated 2 quarters, called AM and AH, in a way that had never been done before. But he excavated very quickly, and at that time there was no question of analyzing macro plant remains, bones, or even ceramics. Third objective, to learn more about the settlement during the period when Ur was a capital of the Third Dynasty kings. Until now, remains from the Ur III period have been limited to official buildings. To achieve this, 5 areas were opened. Areas 1 and 2 took over areas already excavated by Woolley in the south of the Tell, in quarter AH. Area 3 and 4 were set up on the edge of this area, and a final area, number 5, was set up much further south in a still untouched area. I suggest we don't follow the order of the excavation, but rather the historical order in 3 phases, beginning with the oldest. Elizabeth Stone's first objective concerned the AH quarter to the southeast of the city center, occupied by the main sanctuary dedicated to the moon god Nanasin. Woolley had uncovered an Old Babylonian quarter here, dating from the first quarter of the second millennium. As this layer was very well preserved, an excavation covering more than 8,000 square meters was undertaken, but at no point was the lower level uncovered. It therefore seemed worthwhile to try and find the dwellings dating from the end of the third millennium, whose ruins must have been located below the level already excavated by Woolley. Area 2, located in Niche Lane, allowed us to go deeper. The surprise was that we soon came across a building which delivered a batch of 18 accounting texts from the Akkadian period. They include lists of foodstuff with their prices, documents relating to surveying, money accounts, clothing and wool accounts, fish accounts, net accounts. Their interest lies above all in the fact that these tablets were found in a very well stratified context with ceramics and even to seal impressions. Area 4 is located to the south of sector AH. Under the direction of Brad Harford of the Penn Museum, it was opened in 2015 and continued until 2022. The first result of this project was the discovery of Old Babylonian school tablets. Many bore the traces of recycling common to this type of text. Once the exercise had been completed, the clay was reused for other work. Fingerprint traces show the recycling process in progress. Some tablets were even cancelled by a cross, something nowadays teachers are said it's an abomination, but it was so done at that time, like beating. All the exercises found in this locus relate to introductory teaching. We are, for example, the beginning of Shulgi A, which is part of what Steve Tinney has called the decade, that is to say the first 10 Sumerian literary texts in the curriculum. These exercises are nevertheless very important as they confirm what a growing number of archaeologists believe. Knowledge of cuneiform was not reserved for a small number of specialists, the scribes, but members of the elite were generally capable of reading and, if need be, writing. At the end of the 2017 campaign, a few tablets dating from the third dynasty of Ur were discovered, suggesting that the sought-after layer had finally been reached, but 4 meters below the surface. Further excavation in 2019 revealed an unfortunately different reality. This is a huge filling layer containing both Old Babylonian material and Ur III tablets. Area 3 is located to the west of the AH quarter. A vast dwelling from the Old Babylonian period was found there, which I'll talk about in a moment. In 2019, it was decided to continue the excavation in depth. This has led to some interesting discoveries. A carnelian bed with a dedication from Shulgi to Nana. The order of the first two columns is strange. To Nana, his king, he vowed for his own life. Shulgi, mighty king, king of Ur, king of Sumer and Akkad. As for the one who would erase this inscription and write his own name, and the curvature shows that a third column is missing, where we can restore from the parallels, May Nana, my king, curse him. A few tablets from the O3 period have been found. One of them, dated to the year 6 of Ibicine, indicates that a certain Munimar had to accept a smaller house in exchange for his own. But the sizes are significant, 310 square meters versus 432 square meters, and the number of beams and door elements indicated is impressive. This is very interesting for the ownership of houses in Ur in the time of Ur3, about which almost nothing was known. And this text was edited in my contribution to the Rencontre of Paris of 2019, published a year ago. The problem is that this type of survey is necessarily carried over a very small area. It was therefore not possible to clear an O3 level over a larger area. But excavation continued at depths down to the early dynastic level. A new site, known as Area 5, was opened in 2017 by a German team led by Adelaide Otto, several hundred meters south of the AH quarter, in an area that had never been excavated before. I'll come back to this in a moment in connection with the second millennium. But the Old Babylonian house discovered in 2017 was built directly on an O3 level. The 2022 excavation, therefore, focused in part on a building from this period in green on the screen. For those of you who would like to see how the work is done on the field, I recommend the series of videos Brad Harford recently posted on YouTube, and you have the reference on the screen. A bowl containing a dozen tablets was found. These were calculations for digging foundations, brick calculations to build walls, beam calculations to cover spaces such as paparum, and so on. In short, you get the impression that this was some kind of architect's office. These are unofficial texts. The tablets are not baked, nor are they dated. They are even notes written in haste and on recycled materials like this half lentil. But the icing on the cake is that next to the bowl, we discovered the plan of a house. This is the first of its kind to be found in a well-defined archaeological context. We now move on to the 19th century. Area 5, opened in 2017 by Adelaide Otto, revealed a large residence whose excavation was completed in November 2022. The texts were discovered in the fill surmounting the first occupation level. They span between Nuradad and Siliadad. These texts were therefore clearly discarded during a change of occupant around 1835 BC, so a century before the city of Ur was abandoned under the Babylonian king Samsu-iluna. The mostly fragmentary tablets, together with sealed labels, were found mixed with shards, bones, and other garbage currently under analysis. Who was then the occupant of this beautiful dwelling? The figure who stands out is a certain Sinnada, described on his seal as son of the scribe Igi Anakezu, intendant of the temple of Ningal. The seal appears on clay labels as well as on fragments of letter envelopes. One of the letters found in the house was addressed to a woman named Nutuptum, whom I had assumed to be Sinnada's wife. After listing the items he was sending her, Sinnada added that he would return 10 days later. The fact that Sinnada was the sender of a letter found in this house does not mean that he was not its main occupant. And this hypothesis was confirmed by the discoveries made in 2019. We found another smaller letter from Sinnada to Nutuptun, which begins, "I'm fine, don't worry at all." Exactly the type of message I was sending at the same time to my wife, who was a little worried about my leaving for such expeditions. What is more, an impression of the seal of Nutuptum herself was found on a ceiling. She is defined as the daughter of Ishar, the end of the name was not preserved, wife of Sinnada, the restoration is certain. So this is a politically correct excavation site, since not only was the seal of the master of the house found, but also of the mistress of the house, and Adelaide Otto was very happy of that. And in 2022, a new letter from Sinnada was found. In the second part of it, the husband quotes his wife's complaints. She reproaches him for having gone far away and neglecting her. The second can thus be reconstructed in 3 stages. First, Sinnada writes, "I'm fine." Then he replies to the reproaches of Nutuptum, and finally he announces his imminent return, preceded by a list of gifts. Beyond this intimate aspect, the 2019 season led to a very interesting discovery, that of a tomb which was clearly linked to the house of Sinnada, but was not built underground, as is the usual case. The remains of 20 people were found there, and the interest comes from the arrangement of the bones. The oldest bones have been pushed back to make room for the new ones, but the arrangement at the bottom of the vault is very careful, with the skulls placed on top of the long bones. Looking closely at the impressions, all incomplete, of Sinnada's seal, I realized that the 5th line was not the same in all cases. Sometimes Sinnada is described as servant of Sin-Eribam, who was king of Larsa from 1842 to 1841, while in others he appears as servant of Tsili-Adad, king of Larsa, for only 9 months in 1835. On the oldest seal, Sinnada has the title of Sangha, temple administrator. On the most recent, that of Ugula Etu, temple chief. Until now, the 2 titles have been considered more or less as equivalent, but it would seem that we are dealing with a promotion. Sinnada, therefore, felt the need to change his seal upon the advent of the new ruler, that is to say, Tsili-Adad. And indeed, his seal is the only one currently known where someone is described as servant of Tsili-Adad. Interestingly, Tsili-Adad began work on the Ningal temple during his very short reign. This building, excavated by Woolley, lies just south of the ziggurat. Another inscription shows that the renovation was completed under Tsili-Adad's successor, Waratsin. Apparently, Sin-nadar had managed to convince King Chiliadad of the urgency to repair the sanctuary for which he was responsible. One of the interests of the epigraphic discoveries in the house of Sin-nadar lies in the numerous school tablets unearthed, including several lentil-shaped tablets typical of the exercises engaged in by apprentices. After having read and memorized the lines of the writing inscribed by the master on the obverse, they had to reproduce the text on the reverse. On this example, the reverse is unfortunately poorly preserved. These are extracts from Sumerian literature. For example, we have an extract from a hymn to the king of Isin, Ishmedagan. This was Ishmedagan. Or we can find a proverb. Proverbs were frequently copied. They had the double advantage of being brief and easy to memorize. For us, it's different because proverbs are notoriously one of the most difficult types of text to understand and translate, and I am sure that Jana Matuszak will not contradict me. This cool lentil has, as usual, its flat side written by the teacher. On the other side, you see only lines without a sign of writing. The lines were not at 180 degrees to the face, are not equidistant, are not even parallel. Clearly, the master had despaired of his pupil's incompetence and abandoned the exercise. In 2022, a copy of syllabary A was discovered. Based on the number of lines, this fragment corresponds to only a quarter of the tablet's original surface and shows clear traces of recycling. The conclusion is obvious. Sin-nadar not only managed the Ningal temple, he also trained future scribes in his own home. And he did not limit himself to teaching the fundamentals, as this manuscript of the lamentation over the destruction of Sumer and Ur testifies. Of the 47 manuscripts known to date, none of which includes the complete text of the composition, 13 were found in Old Babylonian, but no Ur tablet has so far included lines 251 to 267 perfectly preserved on the obverse of this tablet, which will make it possible to fill in the gaps in the text in its current edition. We now move to another area, Area 3, where another large house has been discovered. It corresponds to the architecture of the Old Babylonian period, with the lower walls built of baked bricks and the floors mostly paved. A batch of 45 cuneiform tablets was discovered around the burial vault, which was customarily located under one of the main rooms. 12 had even slipped inside the vault when the house was looted in 1738, the trace of the salvage opening of the tomb being clearly visible at the time of excavation. These tablets are dated to the Babylonian king Hammurabi and his son Samsu-iluna. Indeed, in 1763, the kingdom of Larsa, to which the city of Ur belonged, was annexed to Babylon, which retained control of the region for 25 years. The main character of these archives is a military man, a general, Gulamatu, named Abissum, assisted by 2 colonels. In particular, we see him assigning a soldier to the marshlands. This region close to Ur was under his command, which explains why several texts accounting for fish deliveries were found in his house. One of the tablets records an expenditure of fish for the king's meal at the beginning of year 5 of Samsu-iluna's reign, showing that the Babylonian ruler had then come as far as Ur, a fact hitherto ignored. The purpose of this journey was clearly to personally offer a throne to the god Nana-Sin. This gift was deemed important enough by Samsu-Iluna to be commemorated in the formula that gave its name to year 5. Year when Samsu-Iluna, the king, had a throne made as an offering to Nana, his personal deity, and when he installed it in the Ekishnugal, his pure temple. Babylon's annexation of southern Mesopotamia did not prevent its king from showing respect for this region, ancient Sumer, which they knew to be the cradle of their civilization. The archives of Abyssum reveal the usual economic activities of this type of dignitary. He rented out fields for cultivation, hired staff for a few months, and made numerous loans. One document is particularly interesting. One of Abyssum's subordinates had borrowed money from a temple dignitary, and the general personally repaid the loan. The creditor was an abricum purifier named Eigidubi Isilim. This man was already known from the records of a family living in the sector near the Great Sanctuary, which Woolley had excavated in 1926-27. Eigidubi Isilim appeared as a witness in a contract dated to the last king of Larsa in 1769. His name also appears in a school text consisting of a list of proper names. The student first wrote the Sumerian name, then had to give the Akkadian translation. Eigidubi Isilim means temple whose site brings health, a typical name for a member of the clergy to the glory of the sanctuary to which he was attached. One might have thought that the Eigidubi Isilim creditor in the Abyssum tablet was a homonym of the priest attested 20 years earlier, but the receipt for the money repaid by Abyssum was sealed, and the seal bears the same legend as on tablets I was able to collate in 1987. It is therefore the same purifier attested over a period of more than 20 years. Such a coincidence shows that these purifiers clearly did not have a marginal place in the city of Ur and were able to maintain it regardless of the political ups and downs of their city. The conditions surrounding the abandonment of the site in 1738, which was to last for several centuries, are still poorly understood. I devoted a paper to this subject at the symposium organized in November 2022. I won't dwell on this point, other than to say that the destruction of Ur was attributed to Samsu-Iluna by Woolley, probably wrongly. It seems more likely that the city was abandoned by its inhabitants and then plundered, perhaps by the Scythian nomads who roamed in the area. Ur has been the object of very intensive research between 1922 and 1934. Woolley's excavation campaigns lasted up to 8 months a year. But the site is far from exhausted. You can see how fruitful the resumption of research from 2015 onwards has been. And we are now in the phase of publishing the results of these 4 campaigns. Let's hope that current plans to develop tourism on the site of Ur will not prevent archaeological research from continuing. We will now move on to Larsa. The es-Senkereh was identified with ancient Larsa following a visit by Loftus in 1854. Looting began at the end of the 19th century until 1933, when André Parrot began his official excavations. But the new hierarchy law on antiquities put an end to the sharing of finds, and many foreign missions left. Parrot did not return until 1967. Busy with his excavations at Mari, he handed over to Jean Margueron, who was himself occupied with the MR dig from 1972 onwards, and handed over to Jean-Louis Huot. Huot led 8 campaigns until 1989, with the Gulf War in 1990, followed by the events of 2003, work stopped for 30 years. And it was in 2019 that excavations resumed under the direction of Régis Vallet. So Larsa is a site that was plundered as early as the end of the 19th century, peaking in 1931, and the excavation by Parrot in 1933. And looting resumed after 1990. The maps may seem impressive, but we are dealing with a site of over 200 hectares. So fortunately, there is still a lot to discover, and this has been demonstrated by the last seasons. I'd like to talk about the epigraphic discoveries made at the 3 areas described as PZ, B50, and finally B48, B49. Jean-Louis Huot had launched a first prospecting effort in 1985, thanks to 3 views taken from a helicopter by a Swiss photographer. Since 2019, a great deal of prospecting work has been carried out using the methods now available to us: drone overflights, geomagnetic prospecting, and so on. The results are striking, and they have been synthesized in a new plan in 2022. The survey focused on the layout of the city wall and the canal network. The city wall of Larsa was known to have been built by Gungunum, thanks to your name and inscribed brick. But so far, we have only found the Parrot's Gate to the east of the site, because it was built in baked bricks. Alas, no associated inscription so far. Now, the layout of the wall has been almost completely established. The sections to the south and north of Parrot's Gate show a very elaborate construction with a double rampart and construction in between. The existence of canals within cities is now well established. A canal specialist, Lucy says, has been working here since 2021, and she has made some very interesting observations highlighting overflow basins during high water to prevent flooding, and cultivated areas within the walls themselves. And I am very happy to be able to present these results at the invitation of Hervé Reculot, who is particularly interested in such issues. This autumn, Lucy was able to definitely prove that the town of Larsa was crossed by a large canal. And you can see the big brick building at the edge of the canal, and pipes where water and other things could be evacuated in the canal itself. But there is more. In 2019, geomagnetic prospecting revealed something resembling the piers of a bridge over the main canal at the ziggurat. Excavations were necessary, and in fact, a large mass of baked brick was found, inside which a brick was discovered bearing the inscription number 3 of the Larsa king Sinidinam. It has the advantage of giving an indication for dating. Unfortunately, it does not allow us to determine the nature of the construction because it is in fact a duplicate of the Rime 4 number 3 inscription dedicated to the sun god Shamash and commemorating the construction of the Ebabar, the city's main temple. It is likely that this brick was incorporated into this structure because of its proximity to the ziggurat, and the area therefore belonged to the Temple of Shamash in the broadest sense of the term. This inscription is very important for the history of water supply in Larsa. We know that Nur-Adad tried to dredge the course of the Euphrates once again to improve the water supply of Larsa. But this was clearly not enough. So his son Sinidinam took the radical step of bringing in some of the Tigris water from the east. This was a major undertaking which led to a complete overhaul of the capital's topography, and this bridge pier bears witness to this. Building B50 lies to the southwest of the so-called Nur-Adad Palace and to the north-northwest of the Ebabar Temple. The surface survey estimates its surface area at around 7,000 square meters, which is indicative of a large building. The thickness of the walls uncovered in 2019 confirms this, as they are sometimes 4 meters wide. One of the objectives of the 2021 season was to precisely delimit the building and complete the plan as far as possible. We were able to show that the 2019 stop excavation corresponded to the monumental facade of the building overlooking a large courtyard, the southeast-western corner of which was discovered in 2022. Beyond the large wall bordering this courtyard, a room has been partially excavated, and beyond, the outer wall was uncovered with a baked brick facing onto a street. In room 3019, a rare occurrence in Mesopotamia, the upper floor was partly preserved, as you can see with the recess of the brick wall. In the filling, 8 fragments of mud brick were discovered, bearing the inscription number 3 of Sinidinam and 2 with the inscription number 4. Both texts commemorate the work of the Larsa king Sinidinam in the temple of Shamash, the Ebabar. But the location of this temple is well known. How can we explain that such bricks were initially inserted into the very wall of building B50? The most likely hypothesis is that this was the Gipar, the residence of the Entum priestess dedicated to the god Shamash. The sheer size of the building supports this hypothesis, which has yet to be confirmed. Fortunately, I found more data than those compiled by Joe Ranger in 1967 about the Entum of Shamash, and my paper appeared recently in the volume dedicated to Vanabiga. We now turn to buildings B48 and B49. As early as the 80s, surveys by Jean-Louis Huot and Joël Suire revealed the presence of large buildings in this sector, comparable to the large Old Babylonian houses then being excavated northeast of the site. During the spring 2019 season, a significant quantity of Old Babylonian ceramics was collated in this area, located some 400 meters north of the Ebabar, and a geomagnetic survey gave a precise idea of the scale of these buildings. It was decided to excavate one of them as early as autumn 2019. The choice fell on the less extensive of the two, namely B48. A large house was then discovered, over 650 square meters in area, divided into 20 small rooms around a large courtyard and the main room. The long room 1527 is large enough to have housed a burial chamber in its basement, but this remains to be verified. The shape and location of 1524 near the main room suggest a possible staircase. The entrance of the house has disappeared due to erosion, but it's located a priori in room 1534. In 2019, a few shards had suggested that this building might have been occupied in the first millennium, but this was corrected in the next campaign. We are dealing with a house built in the Old Babylonian period that was never reoccupied. Only 3 rooms were fully excavated, which unfortunately yielded no written documents. In 2021, excavations at B49, the apparently contemporary house next to B48, made it possible to date the entire neighborhood. The excavation was largely carried out by Antoine Jacquet, who was delighted to discover tablets from room 1598, and they identify the owner of the house, the Grand Vizier Etellum himself. The building is oriented by its corners. The eastern corner is covered by a large sand dune, here in red, leaving only a small part of the northeastern facade. The southern half of the building is also crossed by a wadi bed, here in blue, which almost entirely washed away the southeastern and southwestern facades and adjoining rooms. The preserved plan is therefore incomplete, but can be largely reconstructed on the basis of what is known about Old Babylonian architecture. This is a large house measuring 1,440 square meters. The building's structure consists of massive walls of 3 to 5 courses of baked brick. A monumental entrance to the southeast of the building was discovered by geomagnetic prospecting. All indications point to a building of high standing. The pottery found during the excavation of certain rooms is clearly as in Larsa. The tablets and fragments found in room 1598 allows us to date more precisely the last phase of occupation of this great house to the reigns of the Larsa kings Gungunum and Abisare. I will come back to that in a moment. We therefore have architecture and ceramics that are much older than those in houses B27 and B59 excavated in the 80s. They were built under Rimsin and inhabited until Samsuiluna 12. During the excavation of Locust 1595, a small, almost square room measuring 5.5 square meters was uncovered. The concave bitumen floor combined with the vertical drain in the middle of the room should allow liquids to drain away, making this room a possible bathroom. Finally, room 1598 has also been fully excavated. The rectangular room measures almost 7 square meters. The walls were preserved on only 3 brick courses, a collapsed layer spread over the entire surface of the room with an average thickness of around 20 centimeters, which was extremely rich in charcoal and rubbed earth blocks. It contained a large quantity of pottery shards, animal bones, and, above all, fragments of cuneiform tablets, envelopes, and sealings. The epigraphic finds in this room were numerous and very interesting. These are clearly the remains of an originally large archive. broken tablets, numerous pieces of envelopes, but also fragments of seals from chests and baskets. The tablets were probably initially stored in the chest along the west wall, in the reed basket, and in several bowls. These tablets were obviously deliberately thrown to the ground and broken before the room in which they were stored was set on fire. The fact that the floor of the room was paved made the ransacking particularly brutal. The main figures in the archives are Etellum, appointed Grand Vizier, Sukalmar, by King Gungunum, and his son Ikunpi Ishtar. The first seal found and read in the field was that of Ikunpi Ishtar. Ikunpi Ishtar, son of Etellum, Grand Vizier. Then a tablet fairly well preserved emerged from the ground, and we were able to read a year-name of Abissare. This led us to develop an initial scenario while continuing to excavate the room and bring out more and more fragments. We already knew that Etellum had been Grand Vizier under Gungunum. The seal of Etellum's wife was also already known. Ayalatum, daughter of Abissada, wife of Etellum, the Grand Vizier of Gungunum. Our initial idea was that Ikunpi Ishtar would have succeeded his father in the time of Abissare. But impressions of Etellum's own seal were soon found on numerous tablets and on a chest seal. This seal is of the Innaba type, presented by kings to their highest dignitaries, with a legend engraved on 2 columns. The legend reads, Gungunum, Amorite chief, son of Samium, to Etellum, Grand Vizier, son of Nurea, gave this seal. Note that Gungunum is referred to on this seal as Rabian Amurim, Amorite chief, a title previously held by his father Samium and his brother Zabaya, but not yet known to him. This title clearly illustrates the dimorphic nature of the power of the Larsa kings, who exercised their power over both the sedentary inhabitants of the cities and the nomadic cattle breeders of the steppes. It remained to be determined whether or not Ikunpi Ishtar had succeeded his father as Grand Vizier. In the text of the tablets, we find his name in the form Ikunpisha. His seal appears on numerous documents, and the third line is unmistakable. It reads Sukalmar, but the question is whether this was Ikunpi Ishtar's or his father's title. 2 additional elements led us to revise our initial version of the story. Some tablets were sealed by another son of Etellum named Sinsululi. Sinsululi, son of Etellum, Grand Vizier, servant of Abissare. That was too many Grand Vizier at once, especially since a tablet dated year 11 of Abissare mentions a large quantity of grain intended for Etellum's food, so he was still alive at that date. The idea of retirement being foreign to ancient Mesopotamia, it has come to be understood that Etellum in fact remained in office until the end of Abissare's reign. Ikunpi Ishtar and Sinsululi were merely the sons of the Grand Vizier, and it is in this sense that their seals should be understood. In any case, the seals of Etellum, Ikunpi Ishtar, and Sinsululi complement that of Ayalatum. The name of a third son has not been preserved, but on his seal he bore the title of scribe, and traces of a fourth son's seal have been deciphered. This is a very rare case for an elite family of this period, where we have the seals of the father, mother, and 4 sons. Reading the documents after drying and cleaning them has enabled us to clarify the contents of these archives. 3 tablets date back to the second half of Gungunum's reign. All the others with a year are dated to his successor Abisare, and known date from Sumuel. The content of the text reflects the management of the residence, not the responsibilities of the Grand Vizier. Most texts are accounting documents, receipts corresponding to the internal management of the household, staff rations, livestock feed, and so on. Expenditure is most often made in the name of Ikunpisha. Correspondence is limited to 3 letters. And finally, there are a few contracts. Having weighed all the fragments, we arrived at an estimate of their initial number at around 80. This discovery opens up a whole new chapter in the history of Larsa in the late 20th and early 19th centuries. Until now, texts from this period have been few and far between. Let's look at Archibab for the reign of Gungunum. Archibab lists 62 texts, for Abisari 87, most of them from Ur. The numerous seal impressions on both tablets and envelope fragments include legends revealing new dignitaries. Thus, Eashar, son of Nuria, and therefore brother of the Grand Vizier Etellum, is described on his seal as Utul of Samium. This title is translated in the CAD as shepherd. But in reality, we see here that this man was the kingdom's chief pastoral officer, so the equivalent of the merhum in the kingdom of Mari. But here we have the Sumerian title. In Mari, you have the Amorite equivalent. And this Eashar, therefore, had authority over the nomadic part of the population, while his brother held the position of Grand Vizier. And Eashar was clearly an important person, as a place name in the Larsa region bears his name. And we have the feeling that we are at a time where nomadic people went on being more and more sedentary. There are also seal impressions of a princess named Rubatum, described as daughter of Zabaya and wife of Ishtar-Kima Iliya. She was the cousin of King Abisare. And the corpus of impressions enables us to reconstruct over 30 seals, some of which include iconography. They belong to scribes, a priest, a merchant, and so on, all members of the Larsa elite of the time. These epigraphic discoveries make it possible to date the moment when residence B49 was abandoned, the end of Abisare's reign, since no tablet dates from his successor Sumuel. The continuity between the two reigns has generally been emphasized, but nowhere does Sumuel claim to be the son of Abisare, as would be expected according to the custom of succession. The violence with which room 1598 was ransacked leads us to wonder whether Sumuel did not take the throne by force. The fact that Abisare's last reign lasted only 11 years would be explained in this way. The building was not reoccupied under Sumuel or afterwards. All we have are pits with Old Babylonian and Kassite ceramics. The texts obviously do not give the date on which the building was constructed, but the earliest text in the archives dates back to the year 17 of Gungunum. We can therefore hypothesize that residence B49 dates from the time when Gungunum transformed Larsa. He commemorated the construction of the city wall, but this was probably only one element in a vast urban planning operation that took place at that time, and of which buildings B48 and B49 are two major witnesses. By way of conclusion, I'd like to share with you a wonderful discovery made last November. The object is not very impressive. It's a ceiling discovered in the house of Etellum, and with a very interesting seal impression. Antoine Jacquet and I were able to decipher and restore its legend as follows. Lipit Eshtar, king of Sumer and Akkad, gave this seal to En-Anatuma and priestess of the god Nana at Ur, his beloved brother. En-Anatuma was already known from Woolley's excavation at Ur. Her religious function is described by the Sumerian word En, which we translate as priestess for lack of a better approximation. In 1925-26, Woolley discovered a building close to the ziggurat, which turned out to be the home of the En priestesses, designated by the word Gipar. Female holders of the office of En were always referred to in the masculine form, and this explains why Lipit Eshtar describes his sister as his beloved brother, with the ses sign. The office was held by only one woman at a time. When a priestess died, her successor was chosen, always a daughter of the king of the day. Thus, En-Anatuma, daughter of the Isin king Ishmedagan, was installed by her father as the prestigious high priestess of the god Nana in Ur. A statue dedicated by her was found by Woolley during his excavations. After the death of Ishmedagan, the throne of Isin was occupied by his son Lipit Ishtar. He is famous for his law code, written in Sumerian and predating Hammurabi's by a century and a half. It was this Lipit Eshtar who gave his sister the seal, an impression of which was found in the house of the minister of the king of Larsa. How can this be explained? En-Anatuma's life could have been turned upside down in 1930 when the Larsa king Gungunum annexed the city of Ur. However, he chose to leave En-Anatuma in place, although she was from Isin. Clearly, the priestess wanted to please the city's new master. She had a temple built in Ur, which she dedicated for the life of Gungunum. And this year's discovery at Larsa completes the picture. The seal bearing the imprint of En-Anatuma's seal was most likely used to seal a package or vase containing a gift destined to Etellum, Gungunum's minister. I have to admit that I was particularly pleased with this discovery, as it somehow legitimized my presence as an epigraphist at both Larsa and Ur. As you can see, field epigraphy is an exciting aspect of archaeology, and I hope I've made you feel the happiness I still feel after so many years practicing it, and I thank you for your attention.